Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and the Fool.
Like, it gets kind of weird, eh? It's like, if you don't have, like, a big company, right? You have interns where you pay them, like, $15 an hour, and you tell them, go around town, find the mats, and do it, right?
Yeah.
But if your company is, like, 5 people, it gets kind of to this weird point where it's like, hey, we're missing 9 mats. It's almost cheaper just to buy them than to take, like, your staff and...
Yeah. I always did a little cost analysis thing of, made a list of things I wanted to buy for my 3D printer.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I want to order all these things. Mail strike. I was like, okay, I'm going to go downtown and buy them. And so even though it might have cost me 25 to 50% more buying them locally than ordering them, it's like, I have no idea when I'd get them to order this stuff, so...
It's interesting if you actually do math on expenses.
Yeah.
I was just playing around with your fidget.
Yes.
I need to get a second one.
I just have 2.
Need to get 2 more then.
One on each finger.
You know, you can spend a lot of money on fidget spinners. There's some that are super expensive.
How about
But,
a gallium fidget spinner? It melts while you spin it.
like, I was thinking, let's say you want more time in your life, but you can't... You work a full-time job and they don't let you work part-time, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, but I need more time. And I was thinking, you could save time and money, like hiring like a butler. Like you could be a middle-class person,
Yeah.
right? Like or lower. You could be like you could be like a I don't know, like a grocery store manager or like you could be making only like you could be a laborer in your like 3rd year where you've gotten promoted once or twice. And you could hire a butler to cook for you, and you would have like you would be poorer.
That's why people get takeout.
Yeah, that's why people go to restaurants and whatnot. Yeah. But so it's the same thing, I guess, basically. Yeah. But yeah, if you like, yeah, that's a good point actually. I don't go to restaurants at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be the same. Actually, I did an interview with someone at a restaurant recently.
Yeah.
So I ordered a little fruit bowl, so I'd be polite to have something to eat. But I can't eat like anything, right? So I was like, okay, give me some chopped up fruit. I can eat that. Yeah. And even then, I was lucky, I think, with what they gave me. Because, you know, there's some fruits I can't have. But got this little fruit bowl. And she ordered, like, a sandwich. Like this prime rib sandwich thing. And the bill was, like, $30.
Yeah.
You know, that was, like, one meal.
Yep. I have the opposite experience of that today.
And, you know, like, I think the food I make super expensive. Like, a liter of olive oil, right? Yeah. I don't use a liter of olive oil in a single meal. But that's, like, $25-ish or something. Maybe a bit more. But... You're like, oh, I'm using so much. Like, I could drink a liter of olive oil at every meal and be cheaper than going to a restaurant.
Yeah, I went grocery shopping today.
Yeah.
And I got the beef and it's like, oh, this isn't the stuff I wanted. Like, I wanted to actually get the slightly more expensive beef than, like, the cheaper one. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's not here. They've only got these. So I, like, loaded up my arm. I was walking. Like, all right, now I'd find some blueberries. And then I came across the beef I wanted in 2 packs. Selling for $8.80. Yeah. Now, these things usually cost $7 for one. I'm just, okay. I walked back, I put the things I collect down, and I walked out of the store, like, both arms full.
Because they're, like, half price.
It's half price.
And it freezes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it lasts forever, so I bought a huge amount of it. It's just like, okay, this is a brilliant sale for me to grab.
This is theory crafting. I could be wrong here. Online shopping. Not like Amazon. I mean, like grocery stores after the pandemic, a lot of them have websites now, right? And you go to them and they charge you like nothing. They charge you like $3. Yeah. Seems like a really good deal, right? Because you save about like 15 minutes. Yeah. Maybe, like, because you have to take some time to actually do the ordering, right? Yeah. But if you have a layout and they let you save a loadout, then you're set. But I don't know what it's like. But okay, so you save a bit of time. It costs you a couple dollars. And you think they lose out, right? Because... Grocery stores are arranged, the most commonly bought item is milk, right? Yeah. So they put that in the far corner of the grocery store. And then they put the things that basically every person likes, brightly colored sugar, right at the cashier so you get it. So you're not going past all that. You're not having a moment of, I really want to try that. Oh, like,
you're not dealing with psychological warfare.
I went into a store to buy some salt, and I was I was trying to find the salt, and I was walking through, like, cracker aisles and... tortillas and muffins and whatever else, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, those look good, right? if you don't deal with any of that, like I think it'd be a lot. I think if someone's this is my for a certain person, I don't know, like everyone's different, right?
Yeah.
But if there's people that struggle with losing weight because they always eat cookie, like they buy
impulse
cookies,
buyers.
yeah, just online shop because
Yeah.
you're not going to now the online. Well, I've never seen an online store. Like YouTube is the only website that really pulls this off, where they have a sidebar with stuff you actually are interested in.
Yeah.
Like Amazon's a funny one because I want them to be good at it. I purposely click on their recommendations sometimes, and it's never useful. But YouTube does a pretty good job with their videos. But yeah, if a grocery store started doing that, then it could be a bit more dangerous.
Yeah.
People that bought wheat thins and soy milk also bought triple layered chocolate cake.
They'd love to have that sort of data.
Yeah, I'm not even saying wheat things are healthy. I'm just the stereotypical people that brought broccoli and blueberries also bought.
Yeah.
No, they don't have to. That data doesn't have to be real. They can just tell you that that's what happened, and then just try to shove like something that everyone wants a giant chocolate cake, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, not everyone. I don't really like chocolate, but chocolate is incredibly popular. Coffee's incredibly popular. Yes. Sugar's incredibly popular. Now, sugar might be something everyone likes. Some people are, like diabetics and whatnot, refuse it, but it's super popular. But yeah, I think, like, you save time, you actually probably save money, and it's better for you. Yeah, the only risk would be that the mass data thing. I get all my news now from YouTube recommended videos, actually. And I don't watch them. It's just...
You just read what they say.
It's just the thumbnail. Yeah. So that's
I thought you got rid of thumbnails.
Oh, I did, but like on my Switch, if I use my Switch, then it has it on there. So I saw that apparently, with verified by the amazing source of a YouTube thumbnail, the CIA used the Pokemon Go pictures that everyone took to construct 3D maps of the world. So that is the downside with online shopping, I think, is you're giving more and more of your data away.
Yeah. There's some legal legislators who are saying that people should get paid for their online data.
I think instead just stop, just you're not allowed to have it. But maybe the payment's better because that way at least... Because if they just ban it outright, right?
Yeah.
Companies are still going to do it. They're just going to sneakily do it, and then they'll get a slap on the wrist fine. But if they have to pay for it, then it'll encourage them to be like, well, because there's not much reason for us to hide that we're doing it, but now we're losing money if we do it, so it might actually decrease it more than just if you ban it outright. So yeah that might be a good reason to do it.
Well, it's very much the Ink More Pork.
Yeah, you just make a profit off the invaders.
Yeah,
and destroy them that way.
Yeah, well, even like he has the Thieves Guild and the Assassins Guild and the Beggars Guild. Like, you bureaucratize it.
Yeah.
You grind
it to a halt.
There's a funny thing. So you know that Canada is what would you call it? Politically unhappy when Canadian Reddit is angry with the current Liberal government.
Oh yeah, no. Our Canada does not like immigration. Does not like Trudeau. Does not.
Yeah, one of the things I was reading, I totally agree with this opinion. Is one person was complaining, it's like, yeah, but the Conservatives right now have the Parliament in deadlock, nothing's getting done. Then all the comments under that, and it's great that nothing's getting done. This is the best thing you could hope for in a government.
Yeah.
Is complete deadlock. Nothing happens, no new laws get legislated, just nothing moves.
Yeah.
It's like we haven't had anything bad happen to us for 2 months because of this deadlock.
Things run best when government doesn't do anything. Yeah. Well, I wonder... like Javier Milei in Argentina, like he's doing a lot, right?
Yeah.
And he is actually making people's lives worse. Like that was kind of his running promise, I believe. Even he said, like, I'm going to make your life suck. I believe he even talked about that. So
yeah, people knew he was going to do that too.
But if there had been a deadlock there, like if you're in free fall and then nothing changes, it gets pretty bad, I think.
Yes.
But yeah, Canada is stable enough. Well, sort of. Our I think it will be again soon, hopefully, because even Trudeau is starting to like put bans on immigration again.
Yeah.
Although they're not, it's
a 20% decrease versus the 100% increase.
Well, it's like
But those are the numbers.
But is it 20% decrease?
Yeah. Or maybe 30.
No, I thought we're still having immigration, though.
Yeah. It's a 30% increase from the 100% increase that was implied while he's under.
Right. So it's still way up, but it's not as crazy. Because
and the students, which is actually one of the biggest problems, is being really slapped down on. But what the students are doing is they're turning around and claiming asylum. And they're abusing our asylum system, which all Western countries have an unfortunately very easily abusable asylum system.
It's funny, a lot of friends in college of mine, looking back, were people abusing the student system in Canada.
Yeah.
But it's still, like, I don't know if... I think we've talked about this before, right? Like, you live wherever, the system allows you to do something, so you're going to do it. It's not your fault. It's not like these friends of mine were abusing us. Or they are abusing the system, but it's like, well, that's how the system was built, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of the Canadian government's responsibility to be like, no, you get the degree and you go home.
Yeah.
You're not buying a visa.
When I was in university and college, it was a lot worse than when you were. And there was teachers in full-on, like, despair about the state of the classrooms because 30 to 60% of their students didn't speak English good enough to actually participate in the class.
Wow. Yeah.
And like that, like our computer teacher, the teacher we had for, I think it's graphic design, it was graphic design. The video editing class was a little bit better, but the graphics design teacher basically just screamed at the class one day. He got so frustrated and he left and he didn't come back.
Wow. Just because it was impossible to teach?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was like one Irish lady, a Polish guy, and a Russian guy.
Yeah, it was...
Like, Russia is probably the most out there culturally of the three.
Yeah.
And Russians are still fairly similar to us in some ways, right?
Yeah, well, my English class. English. This is, like, core...
Similar to us culturally. Like, Russians used to learn English.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so our English class, which was a requirement for basically any sort of study, had 5 Indian students who didn't speak English good enough to understand the teacher. They had one guy who could understand the teacher's language, but couldn't understand the concepts. And he would try to explain to the other 5 guys what to do, and he would ask me to explain what was going on to him. Wow. So imagine how much that information is getting distorted, because I'm listening to the teacher, I'm going, okay, this is what he's saying. I break it down as simply as I can for this one guy, and he speaks in Hindi or Punjabi to his 5 friends. And after a certain point, what are you 6 guys doing here? Like, the one guy, all right, you're going to have a bad time in this class, you can get away with it. But your friends are actually more than useless in this class. They're making my day harder.
Yeah, they're buying a visa, basically.
Yeah.
Through using their schools to buy a visa. But, UVic, I don't like the school, right?
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I don't like it, in a way, was because my friend couldn't go there. But the reason he couldn't go there is because it has a very high English proficiency requirement, which...
Well, so does the UConn College at the time had high English proficiency. The problem was, the Syrian guy explained it to me.
Yeah.
He said, so basically in India, what they do is they take a comprehension test to see if they pass.
Yeah.
If they don't, they go to a different person and take that test, and these people will pass them. And how it works is basically Canada outsources its English proficiency to India, and then there's the official ones, and then the guys who just buy a license, because you can buy a license in India to officiate English proficiency.
Oh.
And they will just pass you to the standards that Canada schools need.
Because, like, you've done that. You
Yes.
did that test. It's hard.
Yeah.
Like,
I got an exemption from it.
Okay. Like, I doubt you would have gotten above... Like, it's a 1 to 5?
Yeah.
I doubt you would have gotten above a 3. I'm not sure if you would have even gotten a 3.
I took the test, but I got an exemption from it mattering.
Like, it's hard.
Yes.
It's
I know it's hard. I practiced a lot. I did terribly.
Like-
My test score, I think I got a 2.4.
Like, native English speakers get about a 3.
Yeah.
Like, you have massive dyslexia. But, high school students, grade 12, get about a 2 or a 3 a lot of the time.
Yeah, I was getting a 2.4.
Yeah. A 5 is, like, very hard to get.
Yeah.
I think I might have gotten a 5, but I think I got a 4.
Yeah, there's some schools that just require you to have a 4 on that test to go to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you outsource that test, so it's taken in India. And yeah, he was a very interesting person because he knew all the scams, so he just explained them to the class.
I seem to remember 5s were even like
Not possible.
Well, sort of. Like it was kind of you have to be really, really good.
Yeah.
But that gets you a 4 because what you also need then is you need the examiner to have just had lunch or to be their first test in the day, so they're feeling happy.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, this was pretty good. And there's it wasn't it wasn't, there was some 4s and 5s that were kind of even, but they're pretty harsh about it. Yeah. And so some schools, they require you to get a 4, and I think like UVic required it. I think UVic only required a 3, but even a 3 not everyone could get, right? And
yeah.
UBC might require a 4. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
or Queens or something.
My exemption gave me a default of a 4. Now, how my exemption works is it's not...
You went to an Indian guy.
No, so how my exemption worked is it's not, oh, you get exemption because you're dyslexic. It's literally a resource, what is it called? Delegation thing, where, so they go, okay, we have 100 students, we need to test on their English proficiency. And so we all put them in a classroom, then one person can mark their test quickly with a group of other people, and there we now know how proficient they are in the language. For me, it's, I sit one-on-one for an interview for 4 hours with a person, and they figure out my English proficiency.
Yeah.
And that's how it works for people who can't do the written version.
Yeah, it's not just speaking, it's also like you're given a giant block of text and then you're told, rewrite this in 3 sentences so it doesn't lose any information.
Yeah.
And, like, you have to do things like that on it.
Yeah, so the other option is basically have a psychologist specialist.
You have a conversation. They're like, what was said here? And you go, oh, well, this happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's comprehension as well. It's not just, like, vocabulary or something.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, it must be difficult. Like, we have so many foreign students, and like, the exam, like, the marking of it takes a lot of effort on the part of the examiners, right? Because it's all, like, there's no multiple choice. It's, like, paragraphs upon paragraphs upon paragraphs.
Well, even if you go to
but surely the teacher, like your teacher, could just be like, okay, you clearly didn't pass this test, like.
Yeah. Well, I didn't spend too much time with those guys.
Yeah, no, but you'd think the teacher would be allowed to go to the university and be like,
yeah,
can we get like a shorthand test because these guys.
Well, so one of the problems with this is there's a massive amount of corruption going on with this as well. Why they're accepting it so readily?
Because they pay like 10 times the normal price for school.
Yeah, they pay more for the schooling here. And so the schools are in on it.
Yep, my Polish friend.
And then there's another level of this whole scam. So you get certified at your cheaty certification, but they still only certify you at level 3, let's say. And the school is full. You can't go to school. But you need to get a student visa. Well, it's very easy to claim that you're a school. So an Indian guy who's not very scrupulous, who already lives here, goes, okay, I'm a registered school. I can have 50 people in my class. So they go, I'm registered at this guy's school. They pay him $500 a year for tuition. They all come here. They never go to the school because it's not actual school. They just come here and work and then claim that they can get a visa after they've passed the school.
Oh, so that's like a little...
And so
sneaky sweatshop.
Yeah, and so there's a secondary scam going on as well with our student visas.
Wow. And then there's students are only allowed to work for 20 hours a week, I believe.
That was removed.
Yeah.
Students are allowed to work unlimited amounts of time now.
Yeah. Well, I think they're bringing it back, or I think they were talking about bringing it back. But yeah, when they were talking about bringing it back, students were saying, well, how are we supposed to afford classes then? But to be a student in Canada, technically, you have to be able to pay for it all up front. Like you have to be able to do it all out of pocket, basically, without any work at all, because you're meant to be studying abroad. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Because if you're working 20 hours a week, you can't claim to be a good student, right? Like, if you're working 40 hours a week, there's no way you can be a good student.
Yeah, well, I've seen cases here in Whitehorse of a lot of people who are on student visas, and they work a lot. They work long hours all day. Like, anytime I go to a certain store, it doesn't matter what hour they're there working. And it's weird. If you go to our convention center, and you go to certain courts, it is all foreign students in those courts. And so, like, good on you guys. You're using this thing. You're having fun. But it feels weird to see...
Have you seen there's, like...
And all speak the same language. And so I was watching this game of there's like two groups of, I think they're from India, playing volleyball. And there was one Yukoner there playing with them. And it looked weird.
Have you seen, there's, billboard gives the wrong impression. We don't really have billboards here. We have informational placards along the highway. I've seen a few now that are like immigration services.
Yeah.
And then there's immigration officers and immigration consultants.
Yeah,
and they're just like some dude that has an office.
Yeah.
And they just...
Well, one thing which...
And like there's rental places. It's like $400, well, $800 a month to live in this bathroom we stuck a mattress in or something.
Yes. So when I was getting my passport, the office also deals with immigration there, that passport. And there's very strict conflict of interest laws in Canada. We have actually some pretty good ones, besides when they get ignored, which is always. And so there was a foreign specialist worker. She had an Indian accent. She was sitting behind the desk for the immigration, and she was approving people to get like their work visas renewed. Now, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but given the stringency of the conflict of interest I have to work under, which is someone asked me, what's a contractor that I can contact to repair my roof? I can't tell them. I'm not allowed to recommend contractors to people.
Right.
And this is someone who is a first generation working at an immigration desk. It feels a little bit of a conflict of interest violation.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah. And you know what's funny as well? Like I said, we can't blame them for taking advantage of the system that exists. You know, like the Indians were colonized by the Europeans, and now the Europeans are getting colonized by the Indians.
Everyone's getting colonized by the Indians, except like the United States and Russia.
But it's a funny... Well, I've heard that there's problems now with Canadians, in quotation marks, sneaking across the border into the States.
Yeah.
Like, they're having a problem with illegal immigration from the north now.
Yeah.
And that's the longest contiguous border on Earth. So building that wall would be very expensive.
Another problem, which people don't realize, is it's one of the most dangerous borders in the world to cross illegally.
Canadian-American?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because the areas where it is safe to cross are the most patrolled. And they are patrolled by both sides. So Canadian guards will stop
like
you.
the mountain passes and whatnot.
Yeah. And so the areas that aren't patrolled are deadly to go through.
Right. There was something on... Wasn't there something on the news recently? Like some children froze to death? Or...
People are freezing to death. People keep drowning because they're trying to go through lakes and wet areas. Some people tried to cross the Great Lakes.
Oh, wow.
To illegally cross the border.
Jeez.
And they were doing it in little boats. And for those of you that don't know, the Great Lakes, there's a great for a reason in the Great Lakes. They are not a lake like you typically think of. Like, think of the biggest lake you know of, and that is a pond compared to a Great Lake.
Think of the biggest lake I know of, Lake Superior.
Like the biggest lake you've seen in person. Like, we have Labarge here.
Have I been to Superior?
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah. But think like Labarge.
Yeah.
In relative comparisons, like the pond we have on our property.
Yeah. No, I think, but yeah, okay. So, but the biggest lake you can think of, Superior, and now it's bigger than that.
That's an ocean. There's probably some oceans that are smaller than that.
Well, seas, like the White Sea is smaller, I think, and the Adriatic Sea might be smaller.
Yeah, the Great Lakes are huge.
And they're stormy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the more dangerous shipping lanes, is one of the lakes around a certain time of year because of the way the winds blow.
Like the Dresden Files, that's a great lake that takes place on.
Yeah.
Which confused me at first because I didn't realize Chicago was landlocked, in quotation marks.
Yeah.
So I thought that he was, because there's a lot of boating in the Dresden Files.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that they were talking about like Huron or whatever it is. So...
Yeah, one of the lakes is completely in America. The others are 50-50.
What was I looking... It was Michigan touches 4 Great Lakes. So it's kind of the... But Ontario also touches 4, I think. So both of us have claim on 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. So...
But yeah, okay, what about like the North Korean South Korean border?
Yeah, that's very dangerous.
Or
there's also
like China Russia.
There's also the Darien Gap.
Right, in Central America.
Yeah.
But or like the Chinese-Russian border.
Yeah, they are more dangerous.
Like you got Gobi Desert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's underestimated, I think, is what I'm saying. It's
Right.
like, oh, this is just between Canada and the United States. Like, it'll be fine to cross it.
Right. But if you go to a safe spot, there's people there.
Yeah,
And
if you're going to the other areas, they can be quite dangerous.
or like the West Sahara Morocco border.
Yeah, well, so West Sahara, Morocco, right?
Yeah. I think
So so you can walk across that. Or what about you try to take between Alberta and whatever state is there?
Idaho, maybe?
I thought it was...
It's the one that looks like the Yukon, I think.
Yeah, but I'm talking about going through the Rockies.
Right. Yeah, Colorado.
Yeah, try and walk through the Rockies.
Yeah. Yeah, or trying to do, like, you go over the Chilkoot Pass.
Yeah.
That's probably the easiest way to sneak across. But you have to... If you succeeded, you'd end up in Alaska.
Yeah.
So, have you really won anything?
Have you got into America?
Yeah. Well, also, you would end up in Skagway,
Yeah.
which you're not going to be earning your fortune there.
Yeah, well, there's also Mounties and the American equivalent.
But you can
Park rangers?
You can probably sneak through the Chilkoot, though.
Yeah, but they do try to find you to get your paperwork.
And they've got, like, cameras everywhere, too, I guess.
Yeah.
But you probably could. Like, you know, because there's...
Also, you'd be going the wrong way, which would mess with people.
Right.
Because people only go from America to Canada. People don't go the other way.
Yeah, can you even do the scales? Like, that'd be dangerous.
It'd be very dangerous to try and do the scales.
The scales they're basically steps made of stone, but they're, like, steps that are 4 feet tall. So, you know, you can climb up but you're just going down a bunch of 4-foot steps. Yeah, that'd be kind of dangerous. And then, you know, like the...
People do it the other way in the winter when they do it skiing. I know that.
The Mountie station, right?
Yeah.
Where they do your paperwork. There's like a little ridge that you could like crawl around behind there, I think.
Do you know what that ridge is famous for?
Well, they used to mount a machine gun on it, I think, right?
No, the machine gun
avalanche
was mounted on the path. That ridge is famous for people dying on it.
Right, but on a nice day, you know, you could crawl behind the ridge, or you could take the Klondike Pass, right? Because no, that one isn't patrolled anymore ever since all those people died there.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, 300 people, 200? Whatever, 200 people die in an avalanche and it's suddenly not patrolled.
You could try taking top of the world highway.
Where would you even...
I have no idea what you could try to.
Is there even, like, an American place there? Because the problem is, like, Alaska isn't connected up.
Yeah.
Like, you get to Skagway. From Skagway, you can get to Haines.
Well, so you get to Skagway, then you travel through the tombstones back into Canada, and then you zigzag through British Columbia, and then you end up in...
But then you're back to square one. You might as well have just tried to cross at BC somewhere.
Yeah.
It might be easiest to, like, stow away on a ferry.
Yeah.
Going to Juneau or something.
Yeah, no, try get onto one of the cruise ships.
But even Juneau, you haven't really gotten to America.
Yeah.
Like, you want to sneak to Anchorage at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't think... You don't want to go to Alaska. I don't think that works. If I wanted to sneak into America from Canada...
Probably...
Like Ontario forest or something.
Maybe even going through the 2 other prairies. Where are they? Manitoba and...
Winnipeg? Winnipeg's not a prairie.
Saskatchewan?
Yeah.
Like, just find an area to cross someone's field into another field.
What if I just, go to a dock in Winnipeg, grab a canoe, boat to Chicago?
You die.
There's water between both of it. Easy.
I think probably the safer areas is just taking the land routes that you can that just require a bit of bushwhacking.
Yeah.
Wear warm enough clothing.
But the problem with a lot of the illegal immigrants is they're Indians. They're not Tibetan like Gurkhas or something, or not Gurkhas.
Even trying to like navigate correctly.
Sherpas.
Like walking across, it's not tundra exactly between Canada and the United States, but even walking across like semi-cold fields and a little bit of forest area, it is so easy to get lost. Like you would need to go with a compass that would all right, we're going south.
But also like, forget getting lost. 10 degrees out.
Yeah.
Nothing to a Canadian, right? Because we know what to do at 10 degrees.
Yeah.
You've come straight from most of India. There's parts of India that are cold, but you come from like most of India. You're gonna freeze to death. Like 10 degrees, you're gonna have no clue what to do. I mean, you can figure it out, but you'd have to think ahead, and you never know what you're missing, right? Like if I go to India right now, I'd be like, oh yeah, I could survive in the heat, no problem. You probably just have to have the right clothing. But that would be my thought. You have to have the right clothing. It wouldn't be actually, okay, what is the right clothing?
Yeah.
And what do I eat? And like, is the sun a problem? Do I have to wear a sun hat? Can you get snow blindness? Or
Yeah, depending on when you go, this also can be a lot of problems.
is there floods? Like, there's stuff you think about, right?
Yeah.
It's like you go to India and you're like, oh yeah, I'm ready for the heat, and then suddenly like a monsoon comes by and you freeze to death because you're like, wait, what? I didn't know that was an option. Or like a tiger eats you, because it's India. Man, I kind of want to go to. No, I want to play a game like Skyrim set in India. Actually, there's a mod that does that. Moonpath Elsewhere.
Yeah, it does that a bit.
That's basically India.
Yeah. So...
And you get eaten by tigers a lot.
This kind of segues brilliantly into something I wanted to talk about.
All right.
Slavery.
Okay.
So...
Khajiit aren't slavers, are they?
Not the Indian immigration, the workers in Canada.
Khajiit have Redguard if you have coin.
Maybe.
Actually, is there slavery in Skyrim, and would it?
Yes, there is slavery. It is mostly Argonians are slaves.
Right. Yeah, because the Redguard, I don't think.
Yeah, it's Argonians and Dark Elves are slaves.
Did you know that Nords aren't normal humans?
No.
The men and women are the same height and strength and everything. Like they don't have sexual dimorphism.
Yeah.
Among the Nords, yeah. I just thought that was a little fun fantasy race.
So, do you
want a slave? How much?
Do you know the history of slavery across the world is very interesting? Like different places have different slavery. So, in Rome, during the Roman Republic, being a slave is okay. You're still a slave, but Roman Republic slave not so bad. Now, west coast of Canada being a slave is awful. So, let's say you have a birthday.
Yeah.
Sacrifice a few slaves. Oh, we had a good hunt. Sacrifice a few slaves. It's a festival. Yep. Cut open the slave, light him on fire at the stake.
How many? Like, you run out of slaves eventually, right? Like,
you go over to your neighbor, capture some more. So,
yeah, but that's how you cause an extinction, right?
Yep. Clans and tribes got destroyed by certain...
Like the Haida you're talking about?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, certain groups got destroyed by the slavers in British Columbia. Like,
and was this the Haida, or was it like the this starts with an S. I forgot their name.
It was the Haida was one of the groups. But basically a lot of Canadian and American different groups had slaves.
Yeah, and they had slaves up here.
Yeah, it was one of their, like, the thing I read is, it was considered one of their most valuable trade things was slaves for the certain groups. Like, it was their best product.
Yeah, the Shoshone up here had slaves, but they, from what I understand, it was a lot more like the Norse thralls.
Yeah.
Like, they were just another member of the society, but they were the guy that you went to and said, hey, you got to clean up this room.
Yeah, so let's go over to Norse mythology.
Yeah.
So, not mythology, Norse slave, so the thrall. So, how the thrall worked, there are several ways to become a thrall. One of them was you're a criminal.
Yeah.
And you were sentenced to being a thrall for a certain amount of time. So you were sentenced to being a thrall for like 10 years. Or you were sold into thralldom at a certain monetary rate, and then you were allowed to buy yourself, and that rate could never be increased. So you're like, all right, your thralldom is 400 gold pieces. That's actually really high. It's 40 gold pieces. And so legally, there's only a certain amount you're allowed to work without getting paid as a thrall. And depending on who owns you, they might pay you more, they might pay you less, but they do have to pay you at a certain extent. They can only make you work so much.
Right. So it's like a debt slavery.
Yeah, so there was slavery via law, and then there was boat over to England, capture a few monks, bring them back, make them into thralls.
Right.
And so that was basically might is right, which was one of the most important tenets in the Viking culture, the Norse culture, was might is right.
Right.
Like, strength is everything. And so they used to attack each other and capture slaves. But then they figured out this is really risky. It's far easier to boat over to France and England and capture these midgets as slaves.
Yeah.
And bring them back. Then we're not enslaving each other. We can leave that to law. We can capture these really timid, weak people who are just farmers who don't know how to fight. And sure, they might expire a little bit faster than our own slaves, but this just works out better. And it keeps everyone much happier. It stops blood guilds and weird gangers happening and all that sort of thing. And so captured slaves had a lot different deal, which is they could buy their own freedom, but they had to buy it based on what the person who captured them thought their value was.
Right.
But they were allowed to have money, and you couldn't take their money. They were allowed to own a small amount of property. They could build their own houses, plant their own fields, but it really was how much of an allowance did their master give them. One of the problems is you were allowed to freely beat your slave or sexually assault them. And so then it was, what's the local jarl's opinion on how slaves could be treated? Like, so you go, oh, I'm going to beat my slave, and then your jarl could look at you and go, that's too far, dude.
Yeah, that's messed up, man.
And so you're like, okay, I'll do it a little bit less. And then you do it more, and he might go, all right, what you're doing is just wrong there. We're going to have a whole ganger, which is you go to a rock and fight someone for honor.
Right. And the jarls, as I understand them, it's not a normal sort of king, right? Like,
Nope.
they would basically... They were the person that gave away the most presents.
Yes, they were the richest person.
Yeah, so...
Who gave away presents everyone liked.
So the way... So I'm curious how they would enforce law. Like, would they just say, no more presents for you unless you go fight at the rock?
There was two kinds of jarls, basically. There was jarls who enforced it with a fist, and jarls who enforced it through social influence. The social influence ones usually lasted longer. It was basically gangs. Like, there was a ton of gangs, and then there was the king, who was like the mafia boss, who tried to get all of them to listen to him.
And there was like the few exceptions like Canute and whatnot who just conquered everything.
Yeah, well, that's it. So Canute, basically what Canute did is his father, before King Canute, Canute's father basically united all of them because England declared war on them. And then he dies and all the different jarls are basically like, oh, we don't know if we want to listen to Canute. And he killed a lot of people and like, whoa, this guy's hardcore. All right, well, we'll go with you, King Canute.
I was reading about Genghis Khan recently. He wasn't like a warlord. He was like a CEO. He basically knew all the best people.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of the time in clans and like war bands like that.
Like he was what he did. The reason he had the biggest contiguous empire ever was he enforced meritocracy. Like, it didn't matter who you were. If you were the best general ever, he's like, you're my right-hand man. And he went around to people and he said, criticize me. He wanted criticism. He was like, and he would take it from anyone. He was like, he'd go to like an enemy farmer and he'd be like, what did I do wrong?
Have you heard about what people's description of Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
Joe Rogan's basically Genghis Khan. It's like, you funny rocket man, explain to me how rocket work.
But Genghis Khan is basically Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Like, he would actually talk to everyone.
Yeah.
And he didn't care what they said. Like, he was like, he would talk to kings, he'd talk to enemies, he'd talk to peasants, and he wanted them to criticize him and insult him, and he wouldn't get angry, he wouldn't lash out at them, he just listened to them.
Yeah.
And that's what made him, like, this unstoppable force. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. So, from the Norse, let's go to...
Korea.
Korea?
I'm curious about...
I didn't research Korea as much, but I know a little bit about Korean slavery, and that's Asian slavery in general is weird.
Because Koreans were the first country in history to ban slavery, I'm pretty sure. So I'm kind of curious.
I didn't do much research on the Asian. I'd have to do more. But I can give a brief overview of Asian slavery. Was know how people say that peasants were slaves?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, they weren't really.
Yeah.
In Asia, they were. However, if you were a slave in Asia, you were worse than a peasant. And it was basically, there is no way out of it. There is nothing you can do. However, they didn't have chattel slavery in Asia.
I don't even know about slaves in like Chinese history or something. Yeah. Like, did they have slaves?
Yes, they did. Yeah, they did. Everyone has had slaves.
And not just like eunuchs or something.
No, it wasn't eunuchs. Okay. Yeah, that's more of the Ottomans. We can get to that later as well. So the England, how they did slaves is basically, so they kind of had slaves. Both the Anglos and the Celts had slaves. And their slaves was basically, you go on a raid, you capture someone, they're a slave now, and you keep them until their family buys them back.
Yeah.
And so it's a ransom, but while you have them, you might as well have them be your slave. And so if you capture someone who's quite valuable, you want to treat them nicely, but you also want to have the edge of concern enough that their family wants to buy them back before they get into too much damage.
Right.
So if you capture someone's daughter, it's basically like, oh, you better buy her back soon, or who knows what might happen.
I don't know if you know this, but was Ferniad a slave? Like, Cuchulain's best friend? Because, like, why did he serve Maeve?
Queen Maeve was just his queen.
Okay.
So with Ferniad and Cuchulain, they both went to the Island of Shadow.
Yeah.
Storm and Shadow, or
Sky and Shadow.
Sky and Shadow.
Yeah.
Which is a mythical island in Celtic mythology, and they both trained there.
Right.
And so they're like best buddies training. They were battle brothers. Then when they went back, Ferdinand's allegiance was to Queen Math.
Right.
So, and she was the main enemy of King Connor.
And when she sent Ferdinand to attack, and he saw Cuchulainn, why didn't Ferdinand go, "Oh, I surrender"? Like, oh, okay, I'm not...
Honor. It's honor tragic story.
It's like, that's my best friend, and he is unstoppable.
Yeah, it is basically like just honor. He has to serve his queen.
Like, Cuchulainn, I understand why he killed Ferdinand, because the dude's an idiot. But
yeah. Well, he also killed his son.
Yeah, but he didn't know. Well, he killed an unnamed man.
Yeah.
He kept telling
give me your name. Who's your father?
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to tell you. And then he killed him. And then he found his ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was sort of the deal with slavery.
Yeah.
And then the Saxons showed up.
Yeah.
Beat the snot out of the Anglos. And,
well, the Anglo-Saxons were kind of one group, but yeah.
Yeah, but, well, they became one group, actually. So, what's the Conqueror?
Those were Normans.
Yeah, sorry, the Normans showed up.
Yeah. The Anglo-Saxons were...
Yeah, sorry, the Anglos and the Saxons had slaves, and then the Norman conquerors showed up.
Yeah.
They beat the snot out of the Anglo-Saxons. And then the Doomsday Book actually recorded how many slaves there were in England at the time.
Oh.
Because it's a brilliant piece of documentation work. It's like one of the best records ever is the Doomsday Book. And so there's like, I think around 2,000 slaves in England and the area, or Saxony at the time.
Right.
And
it was William pro-slave?
William actually wasn't.
Oh.
The Normans weren't really into slavery, but they weren't really against it. It was sort of like, we're not going to do it here, but if you have them, okay. And a lot of it actually came from Vikings also came along, and when they lived there, they kept slaves because they captured them. So it's sort of like this weird sort of semi-traditional thing that happened in England. And then as time progressed, a law turned up, which was you cannot buy or sell slaves in England, you cannot bring slaves into England, and you cannot export them. So those were laws, even though...
yeah, that was like in the year 1000 and like 66 or something.
Yeah, Bristol was a slave trading port even at that time. So it kind of violated. But that was like the sort of star of it in England. And then England eventually stopped it. But so the slavery... Ireland has its own different slavery history, but the slavery in England was a sort of, yeah, it happens, we'll do it, but we're not actively hunting these people down. We're not trying to capture slaves. We're not doing that. So Africa is messed up. They would go and attack people. There's kingdoms whose all their money was based off attacking their neighbors, getting slaves, and selling them to other people. The Dahani, that was how their whole kingdom was based. And how a lot of these kingdoms ended is the British showed up and said, we don't like slavery. Stop being slavers. And like, no, this is what our wealth is based on. And they bombarded them until they said, okay, we surrender. And that happened in 3 different major slave cities in Africa.
But they had more than, like, you know, they have ancient, like the Egyptians were Africans.
Well, so the Egyptian slavery is also different. So one of the ways that how Egyptians got away with slavery, so this is, there's a mental aspect to slavery. This is one of the things I actually wanted to talk of going through these histories. So the English, the Normans, the Saxons' opinion on slavery was slavery is a conquered enemy, a criminal, or someone who sold themselves into slavery. You can sell yourself into bondage. Like, one of the things is actually kind of interesting concept, which is basically, I can't take care of myself anymore. I need direction. I need to pay off debt. I'm going to sell myself into slavery.
Yeah.
People would take that as a way out. So that was kind of the Anglo-Saxon view on slavery. The Egyptian view on slavery is these are not people who we have enslaved. These are troglodytes.
Yeah.
So instead of might makes right in taking a slave, these are not people. And then the African was we are better than them. We are people of God.
Yeah.
This is South Africa. I don't want to blanket all of Africa because I don't know. This is South Africa. So we are better than these people. They are our slaves. They are lesser. We think of them as people, but they are slaves because we are the glorious kingdom, whatever.
I think, like, you know, the Romans, I could be wrong here, but I think at some point it's not even we're better than them. It's just we won. Like,
no, that's the Romans, is we won. So the Romans was we won.
Yeah.
Or you could also be put into slavery as punishment for a crime in Roman. I want to end on Roman.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was South Africa, though. It's just, like, captured people. And a note on the Dahani is, you know, like, the story of the guys on the horses that fought the people in South America or Central America as, like, crazy odds.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
the Inca were fought
Yeah.
by what's his face? Yeah.
That's very similar to the French and the 2 wars they had with the Dahomey. It is absurd. Like, the first war they had,
Yeah.
12 guys died and 50 were wounded on the French side. And yes, they had guns, but so did the Dahomey.
Yeah.
The French were fighting an offensive war, so they were attacking someone in their own defended land, and they were outnumbered 2-1.
Yeah.
And they lost 12 guys. And one of the other things about it is like, oh, they had guns, they know how to use them better. In both wars, the majority of the victories in battles, the French won due to bayonet charges.
Wow.
And so the second one, a lot more French died. It's like 200 or 400 Frenchmen died versus the 2,000 Dahomey.
Well, I think...
But yeah, it was bayonet charges that the French Foreign Legion fought in a lot.
You know, if you think of... I don't know if anyone's ever done a comparison, but for, like, hardcore, brutal wars, Europe might be... Like, Europe and China might be the 2 sort of locations where that really took place. Like, Europeans... Most people, you charge them with bayonets. They're like, most people don't want to charge with a bayonet in the first place.
Well, one of the things, so this was a French Foreign Legionnaire wrote in his journal, when they fought the Amazons, the Dahomey Amazons, he said, I don't know if who killed them more, us or them. Because they are so bad with their guns, they shot each other more often than I think we shot them. Like, that was how cocky the Foreign Legion felt about those conflicts.
But I think, especially the Foreign Legion, but I think, like, Europeans... Like the Spanish, they might have just been. They might not be.
The Foreign Legion were mostly criminals,
but they might be weird, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think Europeans might be weird.
Yeah.
Like it might be normal if you get charged by horses to run away.
Yeah.
Like if you're the Inca or something, right? But of course, I just want to do the comparison of the Ethiopians. It'd be interesting, French versus Ethiopians in a. Well, I mean, no, let's not. But just when Italians invaded Ethiopia,
yeah,
the Italians had like tanks and whatnot. The Ethiopians didn't, and the Ethiopians won.
Yeah.
So there's a...
Anyway, if we go up into Arabia, so their slavery is very similar to the Jewish in some way, like the old Jewish traditions of there's like a whole bunch of ways to be slaves and you shouldn't be slaves, and like this is all old era before Islam.
Yeah.
So before Islam, slavery is very much, you look at the Bible, that's kind of what slavery is. You can capture someone as a slave, you can buy slaves. They had a lot of slave trading, they had a bunch of things. So under Islam, releasing a slave is considered a good deed, like giving money to the poor.
Yeah.
However, it's not banned. It is not saying you shouldn't do it. It's just if you want to be a good person, you free slaves.
Yeah.
And some of their rules, which was really weird in it, like the Ottoman Empire, is slaves couldn't be Muslims.
Yeah.
However, once you capture them and made them into a slave, you would convert them to Islam. And they're still a slave when they convert to Islam.
Right, but they're locked in as a slave. So
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so there's eunuchs. Quite often they would castrate, and their castration that they did was everything.
Right.
And prized above all was white slaves.
Okay.
But they did take black slaves. And why the distinction between them is important is literally in the Ottoman palace, there was a class of people called the black eunuchs.
Yeah.
And they were in charge of looking after the sultan's sultana and his harem. The black eunuchs were in charge of that.
Right.
And there were several revolutions led by black eunuchs against the Ottomans that caused a huge amount of problems, and Turks for quite a while. Because one of the weird things is these are slaves, and they're eunuchs, and seemingly like eunuchs throughout the world over, they have a grudge.
Right.
And they're very they're put in positions of political power.
Right.
And so they cause a lot of trouble.
And so they didn't want to deal with that again, so they started getting white slaves instead, or?
No, the white slaves were prized more because...
They blended in better in the sand.
No, they were prized more because they're harder to get.
Oh, okay.
And they looked more exotic.
Right.
So they usually had them do something else. Because you could just pop over to Africa, because there's tons of slave train cities in Africa, buy a bunch of black slaves, bring them over.
Right.
White slaves you had to fight...
Right.
And get tributes in. So a lot of times how you got white slaves is you would go to Romania and say, all right, we'll attack you unless you give us 100 white slaves.
Right.
And so they'd give them the boys, they turn them to janissaries.
Right.
And...
Did the Ottomans ever go for, like, Indians or something, do you know? Because big empire.
I don't know. They might have fought them at some point.
Yeah.
But so then we have the Barbary pirates, and their whole thing was going around to coast and attacking people and capturing slaves and bringing them back to sell. And the other way the Barbary pirates made their money is very similar to, I believe, is the Mongolians or the Huns, which is pay us a tribute of money,
Yeah.
and we won't piratize you.
Right.
Unfortunately, not all the pirates would get the memo, and so they'd still do pirating all the same. So America recently formed, and some Barbary pirates show up and start capturing Americans. And so they're like, all right, we'll pay you off, leave us alone. And so it was 10% of America's GDP at the time was dedicated to paying off Barbary pirates to not attack them.
Jeez.
Anyways, so some Barbary pirates showed up on the coastline and attacked the Americans anyways and captured a bunch of people. And people went to the president and was like, this is unacceptable. And this is unacceptable. And he sent them a letter saying, oi, give them back. And the Barbary pirates basically flipped them off and said no. So, the first deployment ever of the American Marine happened of guys getting on boats, going and attacking Barbary pirates in their ships, then jumping off the boats and attacking people off the south coast of Africa and Arabia. So that was the first use and deployment of American Marines. And they were as intense then as they are now. Like the Devil Dogs, like these were the before Devil Dogs, but this is where the American Marine comes from. So basically imagine a guy like in a blue vest with a powdered wig and one of those little American hats jumping off a boat in South Africa and going, what then? Because they're still kind of British. You can't really take us as slaves, so we're going to go and attack your city. And so there's the two Barbary Wars. The first one was basically by America and I think Poland, because Poland also had, they were allies in the first Barbary War.
Why were these pirates going so far?
Yeah, so both Poland and America teamed up in the first Barbary War and beat up the pirates, got their citizens back, but it wasn't the greatest deal. A lot of people were actually really upset over the first Barbary War because they bought their people back as the treaty. And then John's like, what are we doing? We have their city. It's ours.
And
like,
the second Barbary War was Brazilians and Japanese.
No, so the second Barbary War was America and basically all of Europe. So France, Spain, and they attacked again and they almost completely destroyed the Barbary pirates. And one of the things they did is they sounded the shore and bombarded them. And so the Barbary pirates were basically, like the Barbary cities were really beat up. And they tried one more time to do Barbary pirate stuff. And the British went, oi, no. And the East Indian anti-slave fleet basically rocked up on the Barbary pirate states and destroyed them. And that was even considered a war at that point, because with the Americans and the two Barbary wars, there's like conflicts, there's boots on the ground. With the British, I think it was 9 ships of the line.
Oh.
And if you know what a ship of the line is, like people are like, oh, there's a frigate, there's like these big boats, there's all these things. So ships of the line are basically the special super ship that leads a navy. Like they're your badass ship that doesn't have a class because it's a class onto itself. And there's like 9 or 7 ships of the line plus a navy behind that. Basically just destroyed the Barbary coast and destroyed all their ships and then left.
And where are they from?
The Barbary?
Yeah.
They're from the Barbary coast.
Yeah, but where is it?
So that is a collection of South Africa coastline.
Yeah.
And also South Arabia.
That's quite far apart, those two places, right? Like, is it like Somalia or something? Like,
yeah.
Like the Horn of Africa?
Yeah, on the Horn of Africa, like those little areas.
So the Somalians kept the tradition alive, basically. Well, they used to.
So the Barbary state, though, was very much go and capture people. So American slavery was, they had the Atlantic slave trade. They would buy slaves. There was never...
Did the Americans have slaves at the time they were attacking the Barbary pirates?
Yes. Yes, they had chattel slavery.
Yeah.
So one of the things about it is, so the Americans never went into Africa with nets and threw it on people and then dragged them off. That, like, the French, I think, did that a little bit, but the Americans never did that.
Imagine you're like some African guy.
The French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the British to a small extent did that.
Imagine you're some African guy, right?
Yeah.
You're just sitting in your village and you're like terrified. You're sitting, like, you've never seen the outside world, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you've never even heard of rifles, right? You've just got your spear. You're sitting in the village around the fire with your family, and you just hear echoing through the woods like hon 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 hon. And you smell this cheese drifting through, and you're like looking at
it's just the French coming.
the French circling your camp. It's like it's like hyenas circling your camp. It's like
Yeah.
And instead of like the smell of musk, it's just like cheese.
Well,
It'd be awful, but
one of the ways the British basically got convinced other British people to stop slavery was to stick it to the French.
yeah,
Is if we stop the slave trade, we drastically affect their economics.
yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so
American slavery was awful.
so the Americans showed up. They bought slaves from the African kingdoms. So they were sold. The Dahomey sold the Americans a lot of slaves.
Yeah.
They'd bring them back. Maybe 30% would die on the boats over. Then another 20% would die after they got off the boats. Then they'd take those slaves and they'd basically
Breed them.
and that's what chattel slavery is. And the American justification for slavery, because we have like this conquest, we have this thing, Islam was basically we can take other people, then we can make them Islamic and cut off their balls and all that stuff. So the American was, these are lesser humans who cannot look after themselves.
Yeah.
So we will have absolute domain over them.
And I think the reason the Americans had that extreme ideology to go along with it was to justify
How awful their slavery was.
like I'm not sure, just like off the top of my, if there was a worse slavery really. Like maybe the Roman, and I'm only basing that on the fact that no one had slave revolts like the Romans did.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think like the Janissaries was pretty nasty, obviously.
Yeah, well, also the sacrificing of their slaves,
Like the West Coast First Nations and yeah.
Like
But-
that kind of horrified me to learn about. It's like, oh, we have a celebration, let's kill a few slaves.
But that's not personal, right?
Yeah.
Like you're sacrificing your slaves, but
because they were your enemies you captured.
But the Americans were torturing people they had raised.
Yeah.
Torturing them for the sake of torture. It wasn't even to teach a lesson, right? It was just, oh, I can do whatever I want with you. I'm just going to torture you.
Yeah.
Like, it was different. Like, all slave owners were different, of course.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really a limit. It was like, you might know that, like you were saying, how the Jarl might step in and be like, whoa, easy.
Yeah.
In America, it was more like,
This is your slave, you can do with them what you want.
oh yeah, that guy over there, like, he's mean to his slaves.
Yeah.
What can you do? It's like, nowadays, sort of like, oh, that guy kicks his dog. It's like, maybe you can call services on him, but it's like, what can you do?
So in Canada, so the British basically end slavery. And Canada sees that, and Canada at the time is, we want to be British.
Yeah.
Like, we are loyalists. That, basically until the 60s, the Canadian identity, the Canadian culture is loyalists.
Yeah. Oh, they're British, yeah.
Yeah, we're British, we are loyalists. We are more British than the British. We are loyal to the crown. The British have their parliament, they have their government. We are people of the crown and country. That was Canadian culture.
It's funny how Canada and the United States get compared nowadays because a lot of people say America is more right-wing than Canada, right? Yeah. But Canada was literally, like, during 1776 and before that, when the Americans were rebelling against the British crown, you had all the British loyalists flee to Canada.
Yeah.
So Canada is literally founded on being a right-wing nation by the literal definition of right-wing, which is we stayed loyal to the crown.
Yeah. So Canada basically, we're ending slavery. And so what Canada did is, over a 4-year period, we said, all right, you cannot buy slaves, you cannot sell slaves, slaves cannot come into Canada, they cannot leave Canada as slaves. So if you came into Canada and you were a slave, you were no longer a slave.
Right.
And slaves, and then they basically set up a thing to try and buy off all the slaves. So the First Nation groups in Canada at the time freaked out about not allowed to have slaves anymore.
Right.
Because that was like one of their biggest cultural things. And so in typical Canadian British culture, it's like, all right, we were going to buy them off you, but you've made such a hubbub about it, we are going to terminate everyone in this village. So that was how Canada dealt
British.
with the local slaves.
Yeah, that just send a lesson to everyone else.
Yeah.
All right, Aztec slavery. Oh, did you have more?
Non-Canada. So Aztec slavery...
It's fun slavery.
is weird. We talked about it before. I want to go to Roman, so I'm going to end on Roman. So we've kind of traveled around the world to different areas. There's some areas I didn't have time to research because I was planning to research the weekend, and we did this sooner than I was ready for.
Yeah.
So Roman slavery is fascinating. So the Roman Republic slavery was you lost at war, you were worse.
Yeah.
Or you were sold, like there's a bunch of things. But so we watched a documentary and read some books. So this comes from a book, but there's also documentaries. So during the Roman Republic, this is a fictional story, but there's a family which, there's a wealthy Roman family, and they have slaves. They have a son and a mother as their slaves. And there's also an old man. So the son was born into slavery, but because he's born into slavery, he doesn't have quite as big as a debt.
Yeah.
And he can work quite hard. He can do a lot of good jobs. He gets paid quite well. So he has to like do his 2 to 3 hours a day for the family, but then he can go out and earn some money. And he's joking with the family and they're having good times. Like, I'm getting really close to buying my freedom. Once I get my own freedom, then I'll buy my mother's freedom. And then we'll get like this old guy free as well. And then I was like, oh, bless you, son. That's like Mars praise you or whatever. That's like really kind of you to say that. And they're all friends. They eat together, prepare everything. I mean, they are slaves, but it's just as wholesome as slavery can be.
Yeah.
This is early Roman Republic slavery, which was they were a family member. They are part of the household. They had a huge list of rights.
Yeah.
Rome was amazing at this time. They had this is the height of Roman Republic. So they had their aqueducts, they had really good architectural skills, they had really good engineering, they're building their roads everywhere, their legions are beating everyone up.
Yeah.
Massive armies. So then we go to Middle Roman Empire.
Yeah.
They have more slaves in Rome than Roman citizens. So I'm talking about the city of Rome.
Yeah.
So big population. For every one citizen, there's 2 to 3 slaves.
Yeah.
And this was in the documentary. So it's like, this building is getting built. Like, this is a brand new building, and it's being built with slave labor.
And these slaves would be like Gauls and...
Everyone. Gauls, Goths, Visigoths.
Right. Just whoever they could find.
Yeah. Capture, put into slavery. This is when they had special legions designed to put down slave revolts. This is kind of like the time that this... Like, it started sooner than this, but this is what those legions were for. Because your population is for every one Roman, you have 2 slaves.
So this would be like Spartacus's time, or a bit before that, or
around that time,
right?
Like this is right before the fall of the Western Empire.
Right.
This is one of the main leads to the fall of the Western Empire. Is actually this amount of slaves. So they were building this building, and the wall collapsed and killed 20 slaves.
Yeah.
And they're like, we have 50 or so slaves building this building. It's obviously not enough. We're going to get another 30 to help build us. Then the narrator says, back in the heights of the Roman Republic, they would have been able to build this building taller and faster with fewer workers who are Roman engineers using cranes and pulley systems. But because they have the sheer force of slave labor, instead of spending the bit of time to invest into like building a crane to lift things up, you can always just have more slaves. And so Roman technology actually went backwards, and Roman innovation went backwards because of slavery. And so where this is all coming to, and the interesting thing of slavery, and look at this, because like Rome has a ridiculous long history and has a great history to track of looking at basically their increasing dependence on slavery and slave labor, is slavery is the destruction of innovation besides one field of innovation, controlling slaves, how to keep them in line. That's what you innovate on now, because sure, you could make a better crane system, you could have a water wheel, you could build better, you could have better architectural skills.
Or you could figure out how to get 3 more slaves.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And so even, what probably part of this is the video of, is like, look at the skill of these fruit pickers. And that guy posted a video underneath it of a vehicle driving along and just picking it all on a different one. So for a very long time we had this problem with cotton picking, which was we actually didn't have machines to pick cotton. You had to do it by hand. Cotton wasn't worth that much because it's only had value if you could have basically slave labor picking it.
Yeah.
And then a machine was made to pick cotton. We have far better ones today. And the description of this one vehicle, so there's one guy driving it. This vehicle can do the labor of 300 people. This one vehicle, because cotton picking is nasty.
Yeah.
Your hands get destroyed. It takes a lot of work. It's back-breaking. It is terrible work. You have to do all day. It's quite hot where cotton grows. So, like, it's one of the worst jobs in the world to have if you're doing it manually. And this thing can do the work of 300 people. It's like, but they would never even think to try to make that because you have 300 slaves. You don't need to make the cotton picker 300.
I forget who said it, and it's not exactly true. But if you look at the height of the Roman Empire and the Renaissance, they're roughly technologically similar, right?
Yeah.
But the height of the Roman Empire to the Renaissance was like at 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Well, more than that. Like, I guess the height was Augustus, really. The start was the height. So
yeah.
1,500 years in a lot of ways. So they had 1,500 years to get to the Renaissance, and the technology didn't really change that much.
Yeah.
The Renaissance to 2000, they put a man on the moon. The Romans was around for 500 years. They could have put a man on the moon if they hadn't had slaves.
Possibly. But so that's part of what I see with taking in like tons of foreign workers to do low skilled jobs, like in the fruit picking, is kind of modern slavery. Like it is the destruction of innovation. It's like, who's going to do this work for us?
But cheap immigrants.
It's like you could do cheap immigrants, and then you don't have to care about it, and you have to figure out how to stop your country from collapsing.
Or you could make things expensive in your country until someone comes along and invents the next cotton.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Like Japan was looking at, and Japan's currently trying to bring in immigration, and it's kind of against their will. They're basically being blackmailed by BlackRock and other conglomerates saying you have to bring these people in or we'll stop investing in you.
Yeah.
But Japan before that was going, all right, we have a problem.
Let's make robots.
Yeah. Like one of the coolest, Japan has this cafe, which all the waiters are robots. But it's not autonomous robots. It is, so you are disabled, you can only move your hand and you can speak.
Right.
So you have a computer set up. You control one of these robots, and your robot goes along and someone's like, oh, I'll get this cheesecake. You speak and it's like, all right, I'll get you that cheesecake. You're driving a cute little robot. It gets the person their cheesecake given to them. You make a wage.
Even though you're disabled.
You're disabled. You can't be a waiter in this restaurant, but they let you do it.
That's so cool.
And so this is like one of Japan's restaurants. And you could extrapolate that. Like, you could have king of the old people. Like, so think about this, right? So you have the old folks home.
Yeah.
And you've got like Greg, who's 99 years old, right?
Yeah.
He can't move. He can only like move his hands. And he has like a Optimus robot. He's controlling manually.
Yeah.
And he is like helping everyone else out in the whole facility. And you pay Greg,
right?
King of the old people.
He takes care of the old folks home.
Yeah.
And he actually cares and isn't abusing them. And
yeah, and he like runs one of these robots.
That is so... Yeah, if that had existed 4 years ago, that Japanese restaurant, like I could have had a job there when I was all like...
I think it has existed for
more than that. But like if that innovation had spread worldwide and...
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah. No, it's a really good idea. Mm-hmm. It helps everyone wins, basically.
Yeah.
And that's because Japan's like, we need a solution. Mm-hmm. And the solution now is get a bunch of Filipinos to be nursemaids. But it could have been I think they were doing a bit of both, right? Because they were looking into robots to look after old people for a little bit.
They're still looking at that. Japan, the government of Japan and the bureaucracy of Japan is trying to put immigration in Japan, and the Japanese people are not having any of it.
Yeah, well, that's a tough sell for a country like Japan, like, you know, with the no Korean signs on restaurants and whatnot. Yeah, it's not like Koreans are different from Japanese, anyways.
There are signs on restaurants in Japan.
Expecting a kamikaze attack now.
There are signs on restaurants in Japan which say, in English and Chinese, sorry, this restaurant is closed. Underneath it is written another word in Japan, which is, if you can read this, come on in. And so they basically like, yeah, we have all the languages here that we need to have on this restaurant. The ones above say this restaurant's closed.
Yeah. But, like, Koreans and Japanese, they're the same group of people, right? Like, and they're like French and English. They've intermarried so much that they're basically the same group of people.
Yeah, they're like the French and the English.
Yeah, but they're like the French and the English.
It's the Tim Pool is Korean, right? He's half Korean.
Okay.
And he did a DNA test.
Yeah. And
so he got the result. It seems like, oh, I'm an 8th Japanese. Oh, I'm an 8th Japanese.
Yeah. Well, you know, there could be some stories of true love out there.
Yeah.
Meeting and...
Well, you can do DNA tests for West Coast First Nations, apparently, and they can be Japanese.
I know someone that's half Japanese, half German. Like, wait a minute.
No, someone that's half Argentinian and half German.
I do as well. But this person said their parents met in the States. They didn't meet... Their German parent and their Argentinian parent met...
I know someone who's 100% German, but their family lives in Argentina.
Ooh.
I don't.
Ask them for some of their Nazi gold.
But yeah, it's this bizarre thing of like, all right, so you can innovate, you can try to do things, because, like, sure, you can have a bunch of people, farmhands, like, working at a farm, or you can have a combine harvester.
So...
Like, a combine... Have you ever watched a video of a combine harvester?
Yes.
They're amazing. If you consider the work they're doing versus doing that with a scythe, or even just a tractor with like attachments, like a full-blown combine harvester, those things are insane.
I think I'm pretty sure I've seen them in action in person quite a few times as well.
Yeah, we've seen smaller ones.
No, but like I've seen some on bigger farms that I'm pretty sure. Like not like the full-blown like
I've watched balers at work as well. Like
Yeah.
balers are so cool to watch work.
Do you think okay, so if your theory is correct, like Poland, Hungary, they probably have some of the lowest immigration rates right
Yeah.
now, right? So you're saying invest in like Polish roboticists and Hungarian robots.
So Norway has
Sweden has pretty low
Norway.
immigration
It
too.
has highish levels of immigration, but it's still a lot lower. One of the problems with Norway is people just don't want to go there
Right.
to immigrate.
It's cold.
And like Norway has a huge amount of automation going on right now. Like they're doing a ton of automation. And one of my thoughts is so despite all this, because America has
What's India's immigration rate? I bet it's low.
it's very low.
Yeah.
So India is rapidly developing their technology as well. But one of the problems is a lot of India suffers major brain drain.
Right. Right. Yeah, I guess that's a second factor to look at.
Yeah.
If the people stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't even think immigration is a problem. What I think is bringing in basically slave class immigration.
Right. So you're bringing in people just for cheap labor.
You're bringing in people for cheap labor and also
Not because they're the best and the brightest.
also to influence GDP numbers.
Right. Yes, because you can make your country more powerful on the country level, but your people themselves
Yeah,
become
you can
poor.
also make it look better on a graph,
Yeah.
even though it actually doesn't equal that.
So okay, so when
And so I'm not saying immigration's even the problem. I'm saying slave levels of immigration is a problem. Like,
but not American chattel slavery, just
No.
like well, but you did that huge overview of like
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's basically it's not even it's lesser than slavery, but it's basically bringing in people to do a job
Yeah.
that like
It's more like Qatari like debt.
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing they do in Qatar.
yeah, but it's literally like, okay, so I could build this building with 10 dudes, quite like that Roman building that had 80 slaves working on it. In the Roman Republic, the height of the Roman Republic, 10 dudes could have built that building in less time for cheaper, made the building better, but no, we're just going to have 80 slaves build it.
Okay, all that said, actually, just thinking about Qatar right now, you're an Indian guy. You're looking to get in on getting out for whatever reason.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard Indian parents are pretty nasty.
Yeah.
Like not all of them, of course, but I've heard they have a problem with
Well,
that.
there's also a caste system in India.
Right. So you're
Untouchable in India.
right. So you're an untouchable in India. You want to get out. So you look at Qatar and you look at Canada, right? Like I think Canada seems like the better choice, right?
Canadians are going to kill you.
What do you mean?
They're going to bring you over. You're going to be depressed because you don't get enough sunlight. You're going to not get what you're promised when you get there because there's false advertising. You're going to have to work and live in a very small space. And then when you say, "Help, I'm depressed. I have no money," they're going to offer to kill you.
Right, but you go to Qatar, you get into debt, and then you're not allowed to leave the city without a permit, and you don't have enough money to
Yeah, and you're not allowed to get killed because you're profitable if they keep you alive.
like Qatar ropes you in on purpose.
Yeah.
Canada, we've just incompetenced ourselves into having.
Yes.
Well, I think there's company like Tim Hortons. I'm pretty sure is doing it on purpose.
Oh yeah.
Like there's big companies that are doing it, but I don't think in general we're trying to trap people in like debts, bondage. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in Qatar, I'm pretty sure like they have permits to leave the city.
So, one of my thoughts on this,
Yeah.
and like Mexicans have been doing this in the States forever. Let's not forget Mexicans come over to the States, and it's like an accepted part of being a Mexican culture is potentially like going over to America to make money and being kind of a lower second class citizen.
I couldn't confirm or so I don't know.
This is just basically what I've heard, like hiring Mexicans to do things.
Well, I've heard that the immigration versus emigration for Mexicans in the States is actually negative.
Yeah.
Like the amount of Mexicans, there's more Mexicans leaving than entering the
Yeah.
States. So
yeah, but
because the thing about Mexico, there's a lot of people that cross from Mexico, right? But they're
Yeah.
not Mexicans.
yes, they're Chinese
Or they're Colombian, or they're.
Chinese.
I mean,
Just think about that for a second.
well, you know, there's a strong Chinese population.
Yeah, they're
in-
all about 18 to 26-year-old Chinese men.
Do you remember what Quetzalcoatl said? Right, he said, "I need you to go out and find a lake, and in the center of that lake there will be a cactus, and on that cactus there will be an eagle, and that eagle will be eating a snake, and next to the snake will be a Chinese restaurant, and that is where you will found the great city."
But so with Elon building these robots
Yeah.
and automation, so I was playing with last night a piece of technology, which is you take a 2D image,
Yeah.
you give it to it, and it creates a 3D model for you.
Yeah.
And I'm basically doing this to try and make Warhammer minis from images.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It is so bad at it. I tried doing this 6 months ago. It is quite literally 100 times better
Yeah.
than it was. And this is just one branch of technology. Is I could take this picture of this Lego man that's on a book in front of me, I could feed it to it, and go, okay, I know what Lego men look like, I know what it should look like as a 3D model. Okay, here's what I think I should give you. And I'm using their free version. I'm not using their Scripture Pro or anything. And it's incredible how much it could do.
Yeah.
So, I watched the video on Optimus. I don't know if there's dudes controlling it or not, like it's the Indian tech team that was with Amazon or not.
Right.
But
The mechanical Turk
yeah,
hidden in Optimus.
Even if it's like the mechanical Turk in the Optimus could be a quadriplegic though.
Yeah.
Controlling it with his tongue.
Well, did you see Lex Friedman did an interview with the Neuralink team?
Yeah.
It's like an 8-hour interview. And the first guy, he interviews the first guy to get Neuralink. And he talks to him, and the guy says that's what his number one goal is, to get hooked up to an Optimus robot.
Yeah.
Because then he can take care of himself.
Yeah.
His family doesn't have to, come in and like wipe his butt, right? Like,
Yeah.
he can just control the robot to do it.
Yeah, and then you have the Optimus robot walk into a lead mine.
Yeah.
I talked to a guy who worked in a lead mine. His job, which was relaxing, not working at a lead mine, was that horrible rock processing factory. That was his chill job.
Right.
It's like, yeah, one day we came out of the lead mine, we're in our hazmat suits, we walk into the shower that decontaminates our hazmat suits. We then take them off in the room that we can only take them off with. We're walking around naked in there. We go into the next shower, we decontaminate. And then an alarm goes off. We have to immediately go in the mine to try to fix something. So we're like running to the mine. We can't get our hazmat suits on properly. Some cuts get in there. We do the work. We come back. And I'm in the cafeteria. I'm looking at my hands and realize I haven't washed them enough. And they're probably covered in lead. And so I just don't eat that night. So like, that's the story he told me.
Right. So you get a way to automate lead mining.
Yeah, so Optimus can go into a lead mine controlled by the lead mine. Like, even if that's the level. But maybe we have one guy controlling 100 Optimuses to work and do things. And Arch, his family runs a automation company. That's their firm.
Right.
And right now they're basically working on, you know how Amazon has those robots that run their factories for them?
Yeah, that crush people.
Or wrapped a guy in packing wrap.
Did he?
So a guy, he didn't die, but the machine came along. Know like the spool spin thing? It spooled him in packing wrap.
You know, from that guy's point of view, right? You'd be laughing for like 5 seconds, and then you'd be like, "I'm going to die in the stupidest way ever."
Yeah.
But it's like that guy. He actually did die. Like an elephant pooped on him, and he died. Like, the first 3 seconds that guy must have just been laughing his head off in his mind, right? Yeah. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna have a story to tell," and then he's like, "Oh."
Yeah. So one of the problems with those factories is you have your robot drive around whatever system, and there's like a broom that's fallen over, and it can't deal with that.
Right.
So what Arch's family is currently working on, their company, is making modular systems to work around these problems, so factories can be super automated.
I could do that. Chainsaws at the base, right? You just don't stop for anything. It just, something gets in the way.
So yeah, there's
straight in the wood chipper.
There's and the Optimus bot. People are like, oh, you want a specialized robot, like a specific robot. But why the Optimize is so good is we've built all of our technology for humans.
Yeah.
So if we can have a humanoid robot,
then the robot can do whatever human can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we can also like build the giant Tractor 2000 that drives by itself in the automated cars.
I think I was watching like the Boston Dynamics guy an interview like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And I think robots are still way weaker than humans.
Yeah. So Optimus, like robot uprising.
Yeah.
You can push over Optimus with your hand. They weigh 55 pounds.
But even if you like made it like super.
Yeah.
Like I wonder, like, what's its pinky reach? Like, can you get it to clean out your ear by sticking its pinky in your ear?
There's
like that sort of thing.
Water-based muscle robot that has 80% of what a human can do with his arm.
Wow. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing. I saw that, I think it's Kim Kardashian bought an Optimus robot.
No, they gave her one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good start, though, right? Like, that's someone actually owning one of these as like a
test
thing you can buy.
Yeah. So...
And what does it do right now? Like,
yeah, well, I don't know what they can do, but like that's what I'm saying. Like, I watched the video. I wasn't super impressed with them. Like, they're quite slow, but even then, we have So one of the things that Optimists did, one of their proof cases, is mixing drinks or pouring or flipping things.
Yeah.
And I just realized they're doing everything that you could do at Tim Hortons.
Right.
And so that's what you could do with Optimus.
So here's the question.
So, well, here's my question. Is so we're doing this thing right now, which is we're importing slaves because it seems like humans love slaves.
Yeah.
When we don't have slaves, we either try to get slaves or we make technology which makes it so one person can do a bunch of people's labors. So, what is going to happen to Canada, the UK, France, Poland, whatever, when we get these robots everywhere?
And then we don't need to
Import a second class.
Well, I think it'll stop because I think the reason we're importing them is because of companies.
But what's going to happen to these people?
I think, like, based on Canadians, we'll still take asylum, but I think it'll be much more like, Eritrea has like a war going on right now. There's a lot of Eritreans here right now, right? But it's like, there's a war going on, fair enough sort of thing. But I think...
Yeah, like, I do wonder what is going to happen to the new Canadian. And new Canadians, like, we have a lot of Indians. It is a fact we have a lot of Indians. Some of them are Khalistani, some of them are not. And that's its own problem. But...
Did you see that protest where there's Khalistanis in Canada saying, go back to India?
Yeah.
And then the genius of it was that you can't say go back to Khalistan.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist.
Well, it's in Canada.
Yeah. Well, no, Khalistan's in India.
Well, it's in Canada now.
It's an Indian state that...
Yeah.
They're kind of like the Quebec of India.
Yeah. There's a protest where Khalistanis were brandishing swords at Muslims who were brandishing swords.
In Canada?
Yes. And there was a police officer standing there, and one of the comments on it was, just let them deal with each other. Just say, go at it. And then the victors can stay.
All right. This is This will either be New Khalistan, or you can claim it for, I don't know, like Saudi Arabia. Just. Oh, that's messed up.
But okay. But like the new Canadian, actually, like we have a lot of Indians in Canada now. Like
you know how I said,
and what is going to be like I think you have to be about third generation immigrant to actually be a part of the country.
There was so there's a guy up in Dawson. His name was Chief Isaac.
Yeah.
And when the gold rush happened, so he was the head of like the people, the Han, right?
Yeah.
There's like maybe 50 of them. So they're just maybe like 200 at most.
Yeah.
So this is who lives in Dawson, right?
Yeah.
Like 30,000 people come in.
Yeah.
Like it was bigger than Whitehorse until recently. There was a huge amount of people come in. And so Chief Isaac is like, okay, we're about to get destroyed in every way, right?
Yeah.
These people are going to come in, they're going to mine everything, they're going to kill everything, they're going to destroy our culture because 200 people doesn't resist 30,000. So he went and so what he said was, all right, you need to learn from these people, but never forget who you are. Never forget your culture. But these people, they know how to mine. We're going to learn how to mine. And he went and he talked to their leaders and he said, look, I'll do the hunting, you do the mining. I know how to hunt, you know how to mine. Yeah. So there was a time when Dawson was starving. So he took his tribe and they went out and they hunted and they brought back like 60 moose and like 60 caribou. And he's like, I'll feed the whole city. And so the other thing he did was he went to Alaska near where he was born. He went to a different tribe of people there. They weren't the Han. They were a different tribe entirely. And he said, okay, here are all our dances. Here are all our stories. I'm going to teach them to you. And then we will come back someday and you'll teach them to us. And so this was 100 years ago, right? It's only recently. They actually did do that. They went back to the people and they said, can we have our dance? And so now they have a culture. They have a ceremony. It's like a holiday they do in Dawson every year where they actually go and they learn their dances and they learn their culture again. So basically he protected his... So he said, we need to learn from these people. We need to integrate with them. And because they have good ideas, but we have to do what we do best. We can never forget who we are. And he went and he stored it for a rainy day. He's like, okay, here's our culture. It can't survive in Dawson. I'm going to take it to these people in Alaska. They'll store it for us. The way the story tells it's so weird. It's like they gave them their culture. It's like, here, take this for safekeeping. It's like, isn't that a lot of work? Like you have to teach them all your dances and all your...
But it's strange because like I think that Indian population is like only ever like might eclipse 20% Canadian.
Yeah.
But I think that like the Canadians as we are, I think that we will outnumber them when it's all said and done. Yeah. And so I just wonder what will happen to these people because a lot of them aren't feeling very Canadian to me right now because they don't speak English all the time. It's like I hear them speaking. Yeah. And their clothings are quite a bit different. Like they're quite a bit different culture. Like at least wear like plaid turbans if you're going to be a cat.
Kind of fun.
Like plaid flannel turbans.
Yeah. Well, like we have Chinatowns and whatnot. We've had those
Yeah.
for centuries, and probably just something similar to that eventually. And hopefully, eventually, the Chinatowns slowly disappear, and the reserves slowly disappear, and the Indian towns or whatever they'll be called slowly disappear, and we get
We
something.
swear our allegiance back to the crown.
Well, no, but by the reservations disappearing, I do mean like we learn from each other, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. There's because like I said that joke near the start, right? That the Europeans conquered the Indians. By that I mean North American Native Americans.
Yeah.
And then the Indians conquered like Canada, right?
Yeah.
But it is something to actually look at and say, fair's fair in some ways. I mean, on the other hand, I do think it's also fair to resist.
Yeah.
Like, I think the First Nations, it's fair for them to resist and to do what Chief Isaac did. And if Chief Isaac could succeed with, like...
50 dudes.
Like, 20 to 1 odds or whatever.
Yeah.
Then I think as long as Canada holds together...
Mm-hmm.
But we need a leader at some point to actually, like, stop this. Like, I don't think Pierre's going to do it. I don't think Trudeau's going to do it. I don't...
If we could get Max, he would, but he's...
I don't trust him. So he didn't ask me anything on Canada Housing 2. So he went on to Reddit and he said, "Look, I'm Maxime Birne. Ask me anything." People asked a lot of very good questions. And some of them were hard. They're like, "You said you do this, but then you took your word back on it, right?" Yeah. He didn't answer them. He said, "I'm going to answer like the top, 10 most answers," because he can't answer all of them, right? But he didn't answer like any of the top ones. He went down to like the one with 2 upvotes. That was like super easy.
Yeah, he answered the questions he wanted to.
Yeah. And then his team came in and they're, "Oh, this was such a good question. We had to take time to think about it." So he'd probably be better.
Yeah.
On the immigration front.
Yeah.
I don't like his fracking and all that, but I don't know. Maybe I don't think maybe he's the best of the bunch, but I don't trust him because of that. Like, he could have just said, "Look, you're not going to like what I do," but because one of the things he does, he wants to ban abortion, right? Like, he wants to, like, not fully, I don't think, but he really wants to make it more strict. And so that was one of the questions people asked. It's like, why can't you just be the anti-immigration guy? Why do you have to bundle in all these things that Canadians already agreed on? Like, Canada doesn't have an argument about abortion. We're happy with our laws.
Yeah.
So why do you have to bundle all this in? Why can't? And instead of saying, because
that is honestly my problem with him too.
A lot of people said to him, if you had said, "Because I'm religious and I think that it's wrong, I would disagree with you, but I'd still vote for you. But because you ran away and refused to answer the question, I will not vote for you." Right? Because even if he said, like, "Look, we have a different opinion because of my religion," it's like, okay, fair enough, I'll vote for you. But instead, he hid.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Elizabeth May for Supreme Leader.
We want the drunk lady.
Yeah.
She'd be fun.
Problem is, she kind of wants to share leadership with this, like, progressive dude that's like...
Yeah.
So, kick him out and...
Just have the crazy drunk lady.
Yeah. All right, we have to go.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The food for thought on, like, looking at that history and the different persons.
Yeah, and, like, the past and the future. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, like, Trudeau is already rolling stuff back, so maybe Pierre will actually do more.
I feel like this is...
Because Pierre's going to win.
My main hope for Pierre
Yeah.
is right now, like, if you've listened to his French interviews, he has actually said we need to reduce immigration, we need to get back to what levels is. And I feel like Pierre is basically saying he's not talking about it because he's worried that it's a big issue, and he might do something about it.
Right. And if Trudeau's talking about it now, then...
Yeah, it's open enough for Pierre to do stuff.
Fingers crossed. And if he bans the CBC, then I'll take it,
Yeah.
I'll take 10 million Indians if you get rid of All right. There's some cool Indians out there.
That's the thing, like, they're not getting a good deal either. That's why I hate is they're literally a lower class, almost slave labor right now.
Yeah. All right, we gotta go. All right. Ciao. Bye.
Bye.